So first, I'd like to welcome everyone to the BGS Advantage webinar series, which is brought in part by our partner KPMG. My name is McKenna Sawchek. I'll be your host today. I'm the Marketing and Communications Manager at BGS, and I've been a BGS member since 2016 in my graduate program. Just a few housekeeping items. We will do a Q&A with our presenter, Casey, at the end of the presentation. So the Q&A is definitely working, and you can use the feature at the bottom of your screen. We also welcome any and all interaction in the chat feature also. So a lot of people are letting us know where they're joining from. If you have any comments throughout, you can use the chat feature as well. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and will be available via Career Central on our website in the next 1 to 2 business days. And everyone who's registered for the webinar will receive a follow-up email with a direct link to the recording and all links that we share throughout the webinar in the next day or two also. With that aside, it's my pleasure to introduce you to our presenter today, Casey Plonsky, Senior Vice President at American Management Association. AMA is how we'll refer to them throughout today. He's a recognized thought leader in the fields of learning strategies, customer experience, and leadership development. Casey holds degrees in both marketing and organizational development from Post University. A little more about AMA. They're a great BGS partner that helps individuals and organizations realize their potential through effective learning solutions. So as a member, you can look to them to help fuel innovation, enable agility, and execute on strategy. To learn more about our partnership with AMA, you can visit the BGS website, and our moderator, Matt, will drop that link in the chat throughout the presentation. But at this point, I will turn it over to Casey to really get us started.
Thanks so much. And for all of you joining us, welcome, and thanks for taking the time out of your busy schedule. We will try to make this as, I'd like to say interactive, but as compelling as I can make it. This is a huge topic in organizations that we are working with. The idea of experience engagement, customer loyalty. What does that truly mean? In today's world, post-pandemic, hybrid workforces, which I'm sure many of you are involved in, work from home, or do I go back to the office? How do we actually work together? And then you look at all of the challenges that organizations have from a hiring perspective. It has bubbled up the need for increased employee experience, increased employee engagement. Unfortunately, many organizations don't clearly define what they are and the role that people need to play in supporting that, and organizations need to support in empowering people to get the job done. So that's really what we're going to talk about today, is the whole idea of alignment around employee experience, the difference between that and employee engagement, and ultimately customer experience. So let's start kind of from the back and talk about the outcome that many organizations are looking for. Let's see if I can move this. There we go. So how do we define customer experience? And a lot of organizations define it as, oh, customer experience, customer service. No, customer experience is actually how customers feel or how they perceive the whole series of encounters when they buy goods or services or interact with a company. Take that into your own life. Organizations have been so focused internally around survival mode during the pandemic that customer service, customer experience has kind of waned. Now, all of a sudden, there's a need to focus on what are we doing to enhance our customers' experience to keep them loyal to us? How do we change the way we do business, because the way customers buy from us has significantly changed to way more online. Prior to the pandemic, people were purchasing online at around 43%. Today, it's almost 70% purchasing online. How are organizations adjusting their experience with that? And so, as I said, think about it in your own world, as you interact with organizations that you shop with or work with, has the customer experience, has your perception of the experience changed? And my guess is it has changed. So if organizations are looking to really enhance the customer experience, as that is only the true differentiator an organization has, then how do we define employee engagement? And many companies, and you'll see a lot of articles around the idea of employee engagement and how critical it is. And, now we have the quiet quitting terminology, and we have, statistics that say 60% of people that leave their organization are leaving for other industries. So that expertise, that experience is leaving the industry. So how do we keep people actively engaged? Well, first we have to define what employee engagement is. And this is really a key definition that we've uncovered. It's the strength of the mental and emotional connection employees feel towards the work they do, their teams, and their organization. So again, if you think about it from customer experience, is all about feeling. It's all about perception. Same thing here with employee engagement. Because if we have positive employee engagement, employees who feel connected to their organization will work harder, will stay longer, and motivate others to do the same. So it is critical to have employee engagement in organizations. But a lot of times, companies kind of define employee engagement as an umbrella, when there's really two significant areas here. The employee experience. And employee experience is the way that we internalize and interpret interactions they have with their organization, as well as the context that underlies those interactions. So what does that really mean? It means, what is our perception of the day-to-day doing business with our own organization? Do I feel empowered? Do I feel supported? Do I feel motivated? All of these employee experiences are critical to the acquisition side of the business, which we know is challenging. If you talk to any HR executives, and I'm sure some of you are working in HR, it is difficult to hire. Just internally, just to share my own experience, I have had a position open for the last 4 months. I've had 3 people come through that were somewhat eligible for hire, but chose one way or the other not to. It is difficult to get people in an organization, but companies that look at employee experience or employee engagement as the umbrella are missing out. So let me just share some data that we've uncovered that shows exactly the impact of employee experience, engagement, and customer experience. So obviously, 63% of companies say retaining employees is harder than hiring them. I would challenge that a little bit. It is definitely harder, but it's getting harder and harder to hire people in the roles. 13% of employees are fully satisfied with their work experiences. 13%. Think about organizations that have tens of thousands of people and only 13%. What if you're a small business and you have 50 employees or 10 employees? Only 13% are fully satisfied. Definite room for improvement. Employees are looking for a positive culture, well-being benefits, and a sense of purpose, which means more communication and positive affirmation from management. So if you look at all of those, they're nearly half of all employees are looking for these things. And I would challenge you to think about, how is your company addressing those? And how are you effectively communicating and bringing that positive affirmation to employee experience? So what this shows us is Employees really aren't that satisfied where they are. Thus, you're getting the new term quietly quitting. I'm going to stay here and just do my job, but my ears and eyes are wide open to other opportunities outside of the company. Not always a good start. Let's look at employee engagement. 85% of employees globally said they're not fully engaged or they're actively disengaged at work. 85%. Think about your own organization and do the math. That's how many are not fully engaged. 60% of the people are emotionally detached at work, and 19% are miserable. Now, this Gallup survey took in account tens of thousands of employees globally and came up with this: 60% emotionally detached. 52% says leadership could have kept them from leaving, but only a third of them had an exit interview. So there was no pathway for employees who were leaving to address why. They were just allowed to leave. Think about what is walking out the door in that statistic, and think about what these percentages do to the impact of the rest of your employees. And then one that I think as consumers and as people in business, this is one thing that we are highly concerned about. 71% of consumers said customer service at large businesses stayed the same or got worse. The pandemic forced us to look internally just to survive or to change our model, our business models. And so many organizations focused internally and forgot the customer. And that's really what this term is, or this statistic is saying. Companies risk losing 9.5% of their revenue due to bad customer experiences. 9% of revenue is at risk. So if you think about your own company and your revenue, take 10% off the top. That's what you're at risk for. And then this is interesting. 6 in 10 consumers believe companies should have resolved COVID disruption by now. They don't want to hear about COVID anymore. And quite frankly, I know we don't want to hear about COVID anymore. But just today, I had a meeting internally, and we're seeing a little uptick in COVID in our own organization and in our customer base. So, COVID is still here. Luckily, I don't believe we're in a quote unquote pandemic anymore. But again, we don't want to hear about it. We don't want people relying on, well, because of the pandemic, we had to do that. Sorry, you had plenty of time to figure this out. So from a customer experience standpoint, we are now unwilling to forgive because we're not gaining the type of service that we expect, and our experiences are not equal to what the price we're paying. So again, think about that. Think about the automotive industry, and maybe some of you are in that industry as well. When you go to buy a new car, I just went last week to an auto show and found a car because we're looking, and really liked it. However, I was told that there was probably about a 15 to 25% market adjustment at the dealership if I went to the dealer to purchase it. Was the experience equal to an additional $15,000 on this car? No. So obviously, we're still shopping. But let's talk about the outcomes of these and what organizations are looking for. So with employee experience, the outcomes, if we manage it well, are enhanced engagement, greater acquisition, meaning we become an employer of choice. And so people will want to work at our organization. Increased retention of employees. So now you're going to have the best of the best working with you. And externally, you'll have greater brand advocacy because you'll be able to work with your team, and your team will then talk up the organization and how well their experience is in working with them. Now, that's a little different from employee engagement, because with employee engagement, as we said, you're looking at increased productivity, greater motivation, increased collaboration among team members, improved innovation and ideation. The one thing that has been struggling is innovation in organizations. As an employee, do you feel free to offer up ideas? And do you feel heard when you bring them up? Or are you afraid to? Because in your organization, it's kind of like that game at the fair, whack-a-mole, where you stick your head up and you get whacked. Employee engagement drives a lot of innovation and ideation within your employee base. Otherwise, that's stifled and innovation is minimized. And then obviously with customer experience, you'll get greater customer retention. They'll stay with you, greater loyalty. You'll get increased revenue. They're willing to hear cross-sell and upsell opportunities. Increased satisfaction with working with you, which ultimately drives greater brand awareness, greater brand flexibility. I don't know about you, but I look at Yelp and I look at TripAdvisor and all the other areas before I make a decision on where I spend my money. That comes directly from us and the experiences that we have. Increased satisfaction, and we minimize risk. So ultimately, that is what we are striving for. Now, many companies say, yep, that's what we need. So let's just focus on the front line. However, leadership is responsible for all three of these. And it's going to sound like I'm picking on leadership. Leadership, meaning supervisors, managers, and senior leadership, they have a tough job as it is, but they're responsible for this. No longer is it training and development's worry or HR's worry. It is leadership across the board in operations. Not only do they have responsibility for business strategy, but they have responsibility for talent strategy. So ultimately, you have to ask yourself, do leaders have the right skill, knowledge, and attributes to drive greater employee experience, which ultimately drives greater engagement, which drives customer experience and the outcomes that organizations are looking for? Do leaders have those skills in your organization? Or better yet, do you have those skills to support this effort? Because while leadership has a responsibility across all three, each individual has responsibility within their own business units, how they collaborate, how they work together. DE&I strategies are usually HR run, and they're focused on gender, they're focused on race, they're focused on other normal DE&I outcomes. I would challenge all of us to think about DE&I a little differently. Think about it as, are we fostering diversity of thought? So does everyone get a say? Do we have equitable alignment between the employees, especially now with hybrid organizations? Because I'm in the office, do I have a greater sense of self than I do if I work at home? Does my manager communicate differently because I work from home versus when I'm in the office? Is collaboration working because I used to be able to go into someone's office or pick up my head and talk to the next cubicle, why now I'm an office of one working out of a bedroom or a dining room or an office at home? And then inclusion. Are we including everyone? You know, are we just having meetings for those in the office, or are we just having meetings for those that are quote unquote regional? How are we fostering that work, that team environment? And then more importantly, now a sense of belonging. Do we all have a sense of belonging, that we are one team with one mission, which is ultimately to act upon what the organization is asking us to deliver on and execute against from a strategy standpoint? But are we balancing the human side and the business side of all our interactions? Because if we're not, Here's the results of poor management: higher turnover, revenue loss, problems with systems and processes, a negative customer impact, motivation and morale suffers. No kidding. Erosion in efficiency and productivity. This is where the quiet quitting comes into play. I'm just doing my job. I don't care about anything else. Productivity goes down when low motivation and morale is suffering. Execution is adversely affected. How many of you say, pardon my language, screw my boss, I'm going to get him by not doing something effective? Or innovation is compromised, and we just talked about that. Are we afraid to bring up ideas? Are we afraid to implement something different? And we've all heard the same thing. Change management is here to stay. Well, change is a constant. Innovation needs to be a constant. Management, leadership have that responsibility. Because here's the interesting thing. Why establish a management framework? What do we mean by that? Well, if you look at what the Brookings Institute said, is there's a fundamental mismatch between the skills that employers rely upon in their employees and the skills that job seekers possess. Even more so, 95% of universities believe students are ready for the workplace. 95% of the universities believe students are ready for the workplace. And yet the Brookings is saying to us, those that are looking for employees are saying that employees who are just coming out of school do not have the right skill set. So why establish a management framework? You have to build that baseline of management skill and understanding before you can really drive employee experience, engagement, and ultimately customer experience. So while you look at these three as three separate areas, it is really one strategy, and it's a leadership strategy because ultimately they're responsible for all three. So areas of focus. This was also an study that came out of Harvard that said there are 5 key areas that need to be a focus for leaders from a developmental standpoint. Number 1 is communication. How effectively are managers communicating, not just strategy or not just daily tasks, but also focusing on how am I communicating in a way that matters to the individual? How do I communicate to my team in general? Too often we've seen since the pandemic that the skill sets of managers in 2020 are not the same skill sets that are needed in 22. Communication being the biggest one. Coordination. How are they collaborating, working with their teams, as well as working with the rest of the organization? Many people are hired into management positions because they were great on the front line. Now they're in management positions and they were never really taught, how do I coordinate? How do I collaborate and communicate upward? So really they're left on an island with all of these people looking up at them and then the organization looking down at them. Without that understanding of coordination, how do they do that? Which leads to the third one, which is connection. How are they connecting strategy to results through the people that they manage? I'll say it one more time. How are they connecting strategy to results through the people that they're managing? Meaning, how are they connecting the dots so we understand what's in it for the organization, also what's in it for me? Remember, employee experience is the feeling, the perception. That's where connection, coordination, and communication is coming in. The next one is creativity. How creative are they? And when we talk about creativity, it's not a right brain, left brain conversation. It's more around how are they building a cohesive team? Are they being creative in the ways that they're communicating? Are they utilizing Zoom or Teams or Are they having one-on-ones? Are they having lunch and learns? How creative are they for continually driving the message to the individuals? And lastly, culture. And a lot of times people will look at culture and go, yep, that's an HR issue. HR is responsible for the culture of the organization. Wrong. We're all responsible for the culture. Leaders have a larger impact on the culture than anyone in the organization. So are their behaviors, are their skills, are their actions equal to the culture the organization is looking for? So when you look at these five, it is critical to think about, are we training our managers or are we hiring people with these levels of focus that we need to drive a greater employee experience, which drives loyalty and employer of choice? How are we driving engagement to really drive more productive, less quitting while working, and well as customer experience? So those are the five areas that I would challenge each of you to think about your own role as well as your management team, and think about how do you get those skills put together and delivered to your leadership team so that you can drive the excellence that you're looking for and the alignment you're looking for in employee experience, engagement, and customer experience. So how do organizations do this? We utilize at AMA a variation of a change model that some of you may have seen before, and we've adapted it to work with organizations around engagement and implementation of strategy. And it starts with understanding what the three levels are. The first is define, and we'll dig into that. Alignment, execution will drive outcome. So what do we mean by that? So let's take a look. Under define, does senior management have a clear vision of where the organization's going to go? Or do they have a clear vision on what the employee experience needs to be to drive the employee engagement that we're looking for to ultimately drive our customer experience? And more importantly, what's the compelling reason? Why are we doing this? Why are we focusing the way we need to focus? That's defining what we're looking for. Next is aligning to the levels of leadership. Are leaders demonstrating commitment? How often have you guys gone to a training or into a meeting and you ask your manager, why do I have to go to this? And they say, I don't know, so-and-so set this meeting up and I guess you need to attend. There's no commitment there. That's passive leadership. What you're looking for is leaders that demonstrate commitment and drive active leadership. Here's why you're going. Here's what the expectation is. Here's what the responsibilities are. And here's what the expectations are after the meeting. Building up that value to the learner. And people call this the WIFM, what's in it for me? Because without understanding what I'm going to or how I'm going to play a part, I really don't know the value of me attending. So there is that next level of alignment from senior team to management team to frontline, so that each person understands their roles and responsibilities in managing the outcome. The next is execution. Does everyone who is impacted have the right knowledge and skill set to deliver on the outcome? And then more importantly, do we have the processes and systems to support that? Not just from a technical. Remember, there's a human component and a business component. So the business component is the processes and systems. The human component is, do our managers understand what they need to do after the fact? Are they having one-on-ones? Are they effectively coaching? Are they giving constructive as well as positive feedback? Are we sustaining these skill sets, especially in training? If you go through training, training is commoditized. And I hate to say that because we're a training organization at AMA, but it is commoditized. What wraps around training is how it's installed. So again, process and systems, reinforcement and sustainment. When all 6 of those are addressed, you have a successful outcome. When one is missing, here's what you tend to have. So if there is no clear vision, the outcome's not permanent. If leaders don't demonstrate commitment, it's not important. How many of you have gone to training, you get jazzed up about it, or you go into a meeting and they're talking about how things are going to change and you get excited and you go back to the office and not only is it the same, it never changes. Same thing with the value to the learner. If there's no whiffum for me, what do I get? What's transferable to me? It's not worth it. So the challenge for organizations before they implement anything is to think through, how are we defining this? How are we aligning it? And how are we executing against it to drive the outcome that we're looking for, success? So I'm going to leave you with a couple questions to think about. How can your organization drive an experience that differentiates you in the marketplace? How does it drive a differentiated employee experience and a differentiated customer experience? And write it down. Just put it down to say, this is what we want to achieve through our customer base. This is what we want to achieve from an employee experience. And I guarantee you, you're going to identify competencies that may not be addressed in your current offerings of development or communication. Next is, what is the gap in skill set to drive a differentiated experience and higher levels of engagement? So think about your leaders as well as the individuals. What do you see as a gap between what the current state is and what the future state is? Meaning high levels of engagement, high employee experience versus current state. Maybe you have decent experience and mediocre engagement. What needs to change to make that happen? And then lastly, how is your organization adapting to the changes occurring in both employee and customer expectations to drive success? We can think about this all internally, but without thinking about what does the customer expect from us? And I use customer generally, not just external customers, but internal customers, because we all have them, whether they're internal or external. How are we adapting to the changes from both employee and customer expectations to drive success? Once you have all of that down, you'll be able to understand if this is where we want to go, this is our future state. What is the gap that's necessary to drive a differentiated experience in our employee base, a differentiated experience in our customer base, and how we need to drive higher levels of engagement? So I will leave you at that point with all of this, and thank you. And if there are questions, McKenna, I'm happy to answer them if I can.
Yeah, for sure. So one has come in. This is, what books, or I'll add in resources also, do you recommend for someone who may inherit a team of 12 to 15 seasoned engineers who are veterans in the industry and they have a type A personality? It is critical, though, for this person to keep them happy and ensure that they retain them.
So I will say this, I definitely have recommendations. I don't have them off the top of my head. They are in my bookcase right behind me, though. If you could send me an email, my email is up on the screen. I'd be happy to send you a list. I hear all the time from organizations, engineers are the worst. to change. And why? Because they are focused on the business aspect and not the human aspect. But we now know through all of this, the human skill set is what's lacking in most organizations, because it was always a nice to have. Remember, we call it the soft skill, the soft, squishy skill. I was at a federal government conference 2 weeks ago and spoke, and everybody said the soft skills are the hardest skills. So why do we call them soft skills? And we're trying to figure out a new name for it, to be honest with you. But engineers are difficult, physicians, anyone that is technical or focused on an expertise like that tend to forget the human side of the equation. And yet that is what drives experience and engagement and customer experience. Again, remember, it's all feeling. And feeling is emotion, and emotion is not a business component. It's more the soft skill, quote unquote, soft skill that we need to address. But send me an email. I'm happy to send you a list.
Perfect. There's another question that came in through chat, so I'm going to try to read that one off.
Okay.
So they said this may have already been answered, but if employers are not satisfied with current college graduates, feeling that they are ill prepared for the professional market, why don't companies go to these universities and colleges to help prepare them? So explain the skills that are needed to not only students, but also professors, department chairs. So it sounds like what this member is really talking about is like going to the source versus, trying to fix the problem afterwards.
Yeah. So I can tell you that we have a higher ed vertical at AMA, and we work with many colleges and universities. Colleges right now and universities are seeing a decline in applications. Obviously, the international student has diminished somewhat from the pandemic, and they're hoping to come back. The one thing that they are keenly aware of is the need for accreditation, business skill set. Those that we work with are looking for that third-party validation around their curriculum. We work with many universities that have aligned their business school, their MBA programs to support what we offer through Beta Gamma, which is our certified professional and manager in management. That program is a capstone to MBA programs and such, so that you get consistent theory development, but now you have real world application to support the development of the student. So when they go out into the world, they can say, not only do I have a BA, I have a CPM, which shows that I've been accredited in the business skills that organizations are looking for. So universities are doing this. Some are a little slower than others, to be honest with you, but the idea of competition and around curriculum is pretty new for some of them, and realizing that they need to partner with the business world to solve this problem, and many are. So, which I'm very happy to say, we're playing a part in that. So thank you for that question.
Yeah, I didn't realize that AMA was partnering with universities. So like I said, really go into the source with that one. But we do have another question from Brian. So do you have any data available on how financial compensation affects employee engagement? So like, for example, employees willing to accept lower employee engagement at an organization for more money.
So I would change that. Yes, we do have data around that. As a matter of fact, salary usually ranks third, especially now. It's around flexibility and it's around culture. And culture meaning, do I have a sense of being in the organization, and then pay? But I wouldn't say, I think that last part was a little backwards. Is the organization satisfied with paying more and having lower levels of engagement? Because employees don't get up and say, I hate this job, I'm not going to do anything. They want to go in refreshed and excited and do a job that's meaningful. So pay is a component of that, but I will tell you, if I am dissatisfied, if I am quietly quitting, I'll jump for an extra buck. And that has been apparent. But the interesting thing about this, Brian, is we're seeing, as I mentioned before, people aren't just jumping. If I work at in pharmacy management or pharmaceutical sales, I'm not jumping to pharmaceutical. I may be jumping to retail. I may be jumping to manufacturing. So it's very interesting that people are trying to find their niche and aren't necessarily stuck where exactly they started their career in banking or in utilities or what have you. They're willing to jump around. So the idea of maximizing the experience to drive engagement is now critical.
That makes a lot of sense, especially with the data that you said, 60% of people that are leaving jobs are totally leaving for a different industry, which I thought was pretty intense. So this question comes from chat. How do you encourage diversity of thought? Can you share some DEI best practices?
Sure. So with diversity of thought, obviously we've expanded. So we have obviously a group that focuses on diversity, equity, and inclusion in the standard sense. But as we start working with organizations through their DEI initiatives, and many organizations have them, we work with them around how do you build in the business aspect of DE&I? Because many organizations have defined it as a human capital strategy. You know, how do we maintain gender relations, race relations? How do we build inclusion? But a lot of times organizations look at it as that's an HR issue. It doesn't really affect the business aspect. What we bring in and work with organizations on is kind of expanding that definition to include diversity of thought, equity of inclusion, and that sense of belonging around solving problems, around working together, higher levels of collaboration and communication. So again, taking DE&I and making it much more palpable to the business outcomes really strengthens the DEI strategy. And that's what we've done with many organizations. As a matter of fact, we've done that with one organization that I'd love to tell you who, but we have an NDA, where they have actually taken on the business effect of DE&I, and they were able to launch a product that was on the plans for a year in less than 6 months, because there was much more sense of inclusion and belonging around solving the problem and getting that product to market. So they saw a direct correlation between using their DEI strategy with a business outcome.
Yeah, thank you for that. So we've got some more questions here that I want to make sure we get to. So how should employees who are not managers advocate for these changes for employee engagement? Do you have any best practices?
So again, this could be a top-down strategy. It could be a bottom-up strategy where the employees are saying to the manager or leader that the engagement is waning. I don't understand what we're doing. We work on a daily basis around communication efforts, not just for managers and leaders, but also for the front line. How am I effectively communicating? How am I talking with leaders or my colleagues to strengthen collaboration and drive the type of engagement that we're looking for? We've done lots of work around peer groups, around team initiatives where they have focus groups or they have a business unit kind of oversight committee that brings these up to management and such. So I would ask, how willing is the organization to hear from their front line around this? And if your manager is unwilling or you're in that kind of whack-a-mole situation, who else could you be talking to say that there is an issue here, that you want to be actively engaged, you enjoy what you do, but you know it could go further? That's part of that ideation and innovation that we talked about earlier. It's everybody's responsibility to innovate. It's just how do you get heard and can you drive that change effectively in your organization? I would say keep trying and see what you can do beyond your direct report.
Mhm. So we have another question here. I'm going to kind of try to sum it up as best as I can. So it sounds like this member, they're in a leadership position and have taken the approach of being friends with their employees, to really establish a connection with them and trust, but they found that that backfires on them with things like deadlines. And so how do you form and sustain that connection without coming across as being a pushover, for lack of better words?
Yeah, and so many times, and I've fallen into that trap where I try to be friends because I don't want conflict, and all I do is create even more conflict, because if they feel like I'm a friend, then what I really say doesn't matter. And if I miss a deadline and I don't follow up on it, it's not a big deal. I would say there's two components, as we talked about. There's a human component. That human component is a key component to experience and engagement. Doesn't mean you have to be a friend, but you have to realize what is the emotional connection that employee has to the organization, and how do you foster that? How do you foster frank and honest feedback and communication with them? That doesn't mean you have to be a friend, but you have to be able to articulate and work with them to give them the proper coaching, the proper feedback, and the proper skill set to deliver on the job. The business is the outcomes that you're expecting. It's getting work done through others. It's teaming. It's all those pieces that we put in place. My suggestion is you always balance the human and the business. You always start on the business, ask them how they're doing. You can, add some personal touches, build that rapport, but then there's a business component that needs to be done. And a lot of times, if we make friends with our teams, we tend not to inspect what we expect. And I know that's a cliche term, but it matters. So when they miss a deadline, what are the ramifications? Is it that you just don't want to have that kind of conflict? Or is it that I forgot, I didn't really look and manage it? So from a leadership standpoint, there's that fine balance of human and business, but never forget that human is what drives experience and engagement. Business will get done. It's how you interact on that level that matters. But being their friend never really works. And I'm sorry that it backfired, but hopefully you're on the right path to build it back up.
Definitely. Well, that was the last question for now. And just as a reminder, this webinar is being recorded and it'll be on our website in the next 1 to 2 days, but all who registered will also receive an email with a direct link. And Casey, I want to give you enough time to make sure we touch on the AMA CPM and your relationship with BGS.
Sure. So within Beta Gamma Association, we partnered with them to offer all of the members access to our certified professional in management. And what that means is you would receive the management body of knowledge, which is kind of the textbook for the exam. You've known about SHRM or PMP certification. This is the first one that really drives management skill development around 4 core areas that include those 5 that I just mentioned earlier. But as a member, you get unique pricing for the textbook, for the on-demand access for prep, as well as the application and test itself. And so those tests can be given virtually, or they can be at a site from our partner PSI. But you have normally it runs somewhere around $1,000 to take the exam. I believe with BGS, it's $599, and you get all those assets. Also, for those of you that don't know AMA or know AMA as the public seminar company, yes, we do offer open enrollment public seminars. And if there are specific skill sets that you're looking for, the BGS member also receives a $500 discount off of any of those classes that you'd like to attend. So we've made it very simple because we truly believe in the mission of BGS. I'm still trying to get BGS into my daughter's former school that she just graduated from, but hopefully they're at her new school where she's going to go to law school in January. But we truly believe in the mission. We truly believe in the membership and what you've already accomplished. And we just want to support your next level and see you succeed all the way through your career. So thank you for giving me that opportunity.
Well, thank you for the kind words. We love AMA and our partnership with them. And it does not look like we have any more questions, but I'll say it one more time. We are recording this webinar, everyone, and you will get a link to rewatch it with, can screenshot the slides, all of that good stuff. And the links that Matt's dropping in will also be there. But other than that, I learned a lot. It seems like the chat and the questions, all our members feel the same way. So thank you again, Casey and AMA, and everyone have a fantastic day.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.